2012 has been a challenging year for organized labor. American Airlines began bankruptcy proceedings and sent layoff notices to thousands of union employees at the company's Tulsa maintenance facility. Hostess Brands blamed a strike by union workers for the company's liquidation and elimination of more than 18,000 jobs nationwide. The fate of workers at Hostess and American Airlines is refocusing attention on the labor movement and renewing debate over legislation that union members believe is aimed squarely at their ranks. Michigan has become the latest state to look to Oklahoma's example, enacting its own version of right to work.
More than 10 years ago, Oklahoma voters approved State Question 695, also known as right to work. Since then, union membership in Oklahoma has declined from 119,000 members in the year before passage to just 77,000 4 years later, before rebounding to 94,000 in 2011.
It's not a magic bullet or a panacea, but as one of the other speakers already mentioned, it is a very important element in our economic arsenal. It is uncontrovertible that right to work will help Oklahoma attract new businesses.
Former House Minority Leader Fred Morgan was an early and avid supporter of right to work, which bars employees from having to pay mandatory fees to unions for labor representation. A legislator in 2001, Morgan is now president and CEO of the state chamber. Last January, Morgan urged Indiana lawmakers to pass right to work.
Selfishly, for Oklahoma, it would be better if Indiana didn't enact right to work, because we believe we have a competitive advantage right now over Indiana by being able to compete against you for jobs and capital.
But two Oklahoma union members brought a different perspective to that debate.
We were just brought down to the middle of a room and told that we were losing our jobs as a result of right to work.
There is no anecdotal or empirical evidence that right to work has benefited Oklahoma's state economy in any way.
Jesse Isbell spent 36 years as a union employee at the Bridgestone Firestone tire plant in Oklahoma City. The plant shut down in 2006. Isbell says the benefits from right to work never happened.
Well, I remember that Governor Keating promised that employers were lined up at the state line waiting for right to work to pass. Did it? I mean, it passed. Did the jobs come in?
That depends on who you ask. The state chamber says in the first year following passage of right to work, companies announced plans to add the highest number of new jobs in Oklahoma since 1995. Still, Morgan cannot immediately name any companies that have moved to the state or added jobs because of right to work.
I think there have been some that have mentioned that they looked at Oklahoma because of a lot of factors, but right to work was one of them. Don't have them right off the top of my head, but I think we can provide you with some that have been willing to go on record and say that it is an issue.
Morgan says companies are often reluctant to cite right to work as a factor in site selection for fear of union retaliation.
We know that it happens, but they were unwilling to testify to that or come out publicly. In Indiana, as they went through the experience, they had several site selectors who came in and testified before the legislature that, in fact, they were at a competitive disadvantage, and a lot of companies would not consider their state because they didn't have right to work.
Okay. Gordon Lafer is an associate professor at the University of Oregon. Lafer has studied the effect of right to work laws for the Economic Policy Institute. He says comparisons of Oklahoma to 6 neighboring states don't bear out the claims of increased job growth.
We measured it Oklahoma compared to all those states. We measured just the counties on the border compared to the counties in the other states right across the border. Every way we could think of to measure, and they all came up to the same thing, which is when you separate out the effect of right to work from all the other things going on in the state economy, had no impact whatsoever on job growth.
Lafer says Oklahoma's unemployment rate is lower than the national average, but that doesn't tell the whole story.
But one of the things that we looked at is if right to work had an impact, what you should see is that if Oklahoma had a lower than average unemployment rate before right to work, then after right to work, it should have an even greater advantage over neighboring states or over the country as a whole. And that's not true. It didn't happen.
9 years after the passage of right to work, Oklahoma unemployment rates had risen by an average of 1.4%, while the jobless rate in 6 neighboring states showed an average increase of 1.3%. The number of manufacturing jobs, which had risen steadily in the decade before right to work, has since fallen by nearly a third, from a high of almost 177,000 jobs in 2000 to just 123,000 in 2010. Jimmy Curry is president of the Oklahoma chapter of the AFL-CIO. Curry says since passage of right to work, there's been an exodus of companies from Oklahoma.
We've lost Bridgestone, Firestone, we lost General Motors, we've lost Gulfstream, we lost Fleming. The list is long on as far as manufacturing and wholesale type employers. Mercury Marine threatened to bring all the jobs to Stillwater. We were lauding right to work passage is why we were going to get all these jobs back into Stillwater for Mercury Marine, but the union had another vote on the contract. Not only did they accept the contract, but Mercury Marine closed the Stillwater plant and moved all those jobs to Wisconsin.
Morgan concedes right to work is not the only factor in bringing employers to Oklahoma or keeping jobs here.
There are other things that play into the mix. There's having a good legal climate, having a good tax climate, having a good workers' compensation climate, having good tax incentives in place. They're all part of the puzzle of putting together a first-class economic development of your state.
So where does right to work fit? Lafer says the answer can be found in surveys by Area Development Magazine, which serves the site selector industry.
And they ask primarily small manufacturers, what are the top factors in you deciding where you're going to locate? Right to work, the last time they published it, ranked 14th. It's never ranked in the top 10.
Lafer says the implied message of right to work is that by weakening unions, wages and benefits are suppressed, making a state more attractive to outside companies. Justin Evans is president of the International Union of Operating Engineers. Evans says strong unions actually benefit all workers.
As union wages go up, then this non-union contractor over here, they have to keep their wages right along with it, and it keeps everything in proportion.
Teamsters Local 523 president Gary Ketchum agrees, arguing right to work hurts everyone, not just union members.
It creates lower wages in the states where right to work is. It hurts the tax revenue for the state because of your wages are suppressed. It hurts communities. It is a big lie.
But Morgan says right to work has not suppressed wages in Oklahoma.
The per capita income in Oklahoma has continued to rise. We were, I think, ranked over 40th in per capita income. I think we've been rising fairly dramatically. And again, that's not only right to work, but it does debunk the myth that right to work is going to result in lower wages.
Wages for manufacturing workers in Oklahoma have grown by more than 40% in the years between 2001 and 2011, beating the national average. Overall, wages are also up by more than 43%, again ahead of national numbers. But Oklahoma Employment Security Commission economist Lynn Gray says factors other than right to work are responsible for that increase.
The higher energy prices, that we've seen in terms of oil, the expansion in that industry in the last 5 years certainly probably has more of a role in that for Oklahoma than would a specific piece of legislation.
Even with right to work, Curry maintains unions are still making a difference.
There is nobody else that has a voice. With the state capitol in Washington, D.C., there is nobody else but the unions that speak for the working man and women. So when we lobby here at the Capitol or in Congress, it's for those people at the minimum wage. It's for those people that don't have a voice on jobs, so we are very relevant today.
Steve Bennett worked on this story. Steve, is this just about jobs and wages?
Actually, both sides say that this is really an issue of fairness. Proponents of right to work argue that no one should be forced to be paying union dues in order to hold a job, whether it's here in Oklahoma or anywhere else. But labor leaders say what's happening is that it's encouraging freeloaders. You have a number of people who are working at shops where they're not paying union dues, but they're continuing to receive union representation. And they call this union busting, or at the very least, it's an effort to weaken the unions in Oklahoma.
How relevant are unions in Oklahoma?
Well, they are still relevant. Actually, you've got membership that has fallen somewhat in the years immediately following passage of right to work, but it has recovered somewhat, as we reported. Meanwhile, the building and construction trades are booming right now, and Jimmy Curry, the head of the AFL-CIO in Oklahoma, pointed to the situation at American Airlines, where initially there were fears that they could be losing thousands of jobs. He says the unions and the AFL-CIO actually worked with the governor and the Department of Commerce and, of course, the parent company of American Airlines, and they've since managed to reduce the number of potential layoffs from several thousand to now just a few hundred. So they say, yes, they are still very relevant.
Steve Bennett reporting on that story. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.